We're going to jump right into a conversation because the last couple of weeks, I've been talking a lot about bearing false witness. I've been talking a lot about lying. I've been talking a lot about how when we accuse others, when we bear false witness against others, that we can do real damage to them and we can do real damage to the people of the world. We've talked about what was going on in Springfield, where several Republican leaders, including J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, have stood up in front of the world and said, Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's cats, kidnapping their cats and dogs, and eating their pets, eating the ducks and every the other foulage, I guess, in Springfield. And that's the mayor of Springfield has come forward. The governor of Springfield's come forward. I believe that the police chief of Springfield has come forward and said, no, absolutely not true. Trump has even come forward and said that these are illegal immigrants. And when he was fact-checked on that, when he was corrected on that, he said, well, as far as I'm concerned, they're illegal. These are people who are legally in the United States, who have status in the United States, who are allowed to be there. And from what you hear from the people of Springfield, these are people who are really trying to become decent members of the town, of the community. They're trying to be good neighbors. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I don't know why, but I was reminded today of, I know why, because I was looking up the term alternative facts, and I was reminded today of when that term came about. My God, it was almost 8 years ago. Sean Spicer was talking about the size of the crowd at Trump's inauguration. And he was grossly erroneous in his estimate of the number of people that were there. As a matter of fact, he was just flat out lying about the number of people that were there. And Kellyanne Conway, who was, I think she was one of Trump's spokespeople at the time, she was interviewed and she said, well, we all have our alternative facts, or something to that extent. Like, well, Sean's number of 150,000 or 260 million, whatever it was he claimed were there, that's just as valid as the number of the actual people who were there. A little bit. Today I was watching a documentary on tyranny and how tyranny comes about, how tyrants end up taking power and how they hold on to it. And what a tyrant, what some of the principles of tyranny are, and like the playbook of tyranny, if you would. And one of the things that they talked about, and they talked about how Stalin was incredibly good at this, was controlling the information that people received. Stalin was incredibly good at controlling what people heard, how they heard it, from whom they heard it. He was incredibly good at making sure that people who he didn't want to be sharing information did not share information. Apparently, it was Lenin who came up with the term useful idiot, which were people who they could use to spread their lies. I'm not going to use misinformation anymore. They're lies. It's not misinformation. It's a bloody lie. So as I was listening to this, I was kind of horrified. I was kind of horrified. And for many different reasons. This isn't just and Donald Trump fits the mold. It's more than that. It's more than that. The information that we receive comes through various sources, but it strikes me, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, it strikes me that all of these sources have an agenda. And that agenda might not necessarily be in our best interest. Their agenda might be they want to sell us something. They want to profit by making us watch ads, and so they share with us information. They share with us the information that they think we want to see. They build up within us some kind of, they tell us these things so that they can get us to do something, act in a certain way, behave a certain way, speak certain words. So in a time like this, and you do see it, we're thinking about Florida, thinking about the people who were impacted by Hurricane Milton and the people who were impacted by Hurricane Helene in Tennessee and North Carolina and in Georgia and those places along through the South. I also caught this radio interview of a gentleman who called in. I think he called into NPR, lamenting that his father-in-law won't let FEMA help him. They've come to him and they've offered the help, and he will not accept their help because he's terrified if he accepts the wee littlest bit of help from them that FEMA is going to take everything he owns, that it's some kind of conspiracy to rob him blind. It's some kind of conspiracy. It's these people are acting in a way that it's meant to take away everything that he's earned and built up for himself. And the man who was calling in was just distraught. He can't reach him. He can't get through to him. He can't make his father-in-law. He and his wife cannot seem to convince his father-in-law that he has been told lies, that he has accepted lies as fact. It's growing increasingly difficult to discern for ourselves what the truth is, right? Because sometimes people will tell us the truth and it sounds so wild that we won't believe it. Sometimes people will tell us the truth and it's going to sound so negative that we don't want to believe it. Sometimes it's going to sound too positive and we won't want to believe it. Sometimes it'll be about someone we support and it'll break our heart to believe it. Sometimes it'll be about a person who we really detest and we'll love to believe it. But it's growing increasingly difficult, and yet at the exact same time, increasingly more important for us to be able to discern the truth. Because it struck me today watching that documentary that the truth is essential for us in avoiding tyranny. However tyranny may come about, it always seems to come about because the people ultimately are okay with it. The people. Yes, sure. There's a person who stands up and says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to, and that person becomes the tyrant. That person becomes the authoritarian. That person becomes the dictator. That person becomes the Antichrist. But that person, they're always cheered into power. The populace welcomes them. The populace is okay with them, at least at the beginning. And then when the tyrant begins their struggle to maintain, when they begin the work to maintain their hold on power, then all of a sudden, truth, the bottom line here is truth is essential in defeating tyranny, in avoiding tyranny, in striking it down, in making sure that it's never able to rear its ugly little head. The truth is essential. So what are we supposed to do? And I think that's what I came to. There are going to be times when we're going to make mistakes and we're not going to know the truth from a lie. And we're going to gravitate to the lie. And we're going to hold to it. And we're going to be wrong. What do we do, though, when somebody feeds us a lie is, I think, the best I can offer tonight. See, again, I'm not, I think we've talked about this in the past. I've certainly tried to express my opinions on it. I'm not terribly afraid of tyranny. I don't, the next conservative, the next liberal, the next new democratic leader, prime minister of Canada, I'm not thinking to myself, oh, there'll be a tyrant. That'll be a tyrant, and I'll have to live under tyranny. And oh, what will a tyrant do to me? My biggest fear when it comes to tyranny is that I'll be one of the people cheering them on. Honest to God. Tyranny happens when societies say, we want this person to lead us. We want these people to lead us. And we don't care about their tactics, and we just want them to do what they said they would do, and we want them to protect us from the monsters that they told us were trying to devour us. But it's the society, it's the nation as a whole that usually ushers them in, almost always ushers them in. My biggest fear is not that my nation brings on board a tyrant. My nation, my biggest fear isn't that my nation votes in a tyrant. My biggest fear is that I vote in a tyrant, that I support a tyrant. My biggest fear is that I am caught up in their rhetoric and in their lies. My biggest fear is that I'm one of the ones who usher it in, and ultimately am somewhat responsible for the evil they do, for the damage they cause my neighbors. So for me, again, coming back to the idea that it's difficult for us to discern the truth, what is much easier for us is what we do with the information that is provided to us. How do we act on it? Right? So we find out that, I don't know, we'll keep with the Springfield, right? Keep with the Springfield, Ohio. Illegal Haitian immigrants are stealing people's dogs and cats and eating their ducks. Okay. That's awful. But it's so ridiculous. Well, today, just for this, we'll say, well, sure, yeah, okay, it's true. What do I do about that? How does that information impact me? How do I, as a Christian, disseminate it? Turn it into actions, turn it into words. It doesn't matter if they're illegal or not. My job is to love my neighbor. That's what Jesus teaches me. And if they're eating ducks and dogs and cats, my job as a Christian is to understand that they're friggin' hungry. So how am I going to feed them? How am I going to help them? How am I going to lift them up? How am I going to raise them up? How am I going to support them? How am I going to take care of them? How am I going to make it so that they don't have to do that? Maybe it's a matter of culture. Here in Halifax, we had an issue back in the spring. There was a really we have a huge number of cultures who are coming into our city, and not everybody is completely aware of or on board with some of the ways we do things in Canada. So how do we avoid things like violence? How do we avoid things like confrontations? How do we avoid things like conflicts when we see it happen with these immigrants who are coming in? What's my Christian response to that? Well, maybe what we need to do is we need to take the opportunities that are given to us and find ways of teaching about the Canadian culture, teaching about the Nova Scotia culture, teaching about how things are seen and how things are perceived here at Halifax or in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes, in Canada as a whole. What's my Christian response to hearing these things, rather than just simply getting all ticked off and outraged? Oh my God, immigrants are blah 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 blah. What's my response going to be? I'm hearing need. I hear need in here. My job as a Christian is to meet that need. My job as a Christian is to rally people together to meet that need. Again, we're going to be lied to, and we're going to fall for it. The thing we cannot do is allow ourselves to act in unchristian ways. That's when tyranny is propped up. Right? That's when tyrannies are propped up, and that's when authoritarians end up taking power. When we begin acting and speaking the ways that they're hoping to get us to act and speak. Their lies are meant, they're not just there to alienate some people in our society. Their lies are meant to elicit a particular active and intentional response, and they're meant to elicit words from us. We can't give into that, and we do have power over that. No matter what we believe, no matter what we hear, no matter what lies we end up digesting in error, we do have a choice as to how we will act on those lies, on those falsehoods, on that poison. We do have a choice. And I would encourage you, as I'm trying to encourage myself, I'm going to let go of the weight of trying to ensure that I'm always right, and I'm going to say, no, I'm always going to act like Jesus. So when somebody says, these people are doing this, I'm going to say, how can I help those people? Those people are killing us there. How am I going to help? How am I going to be a good neighbor to everyone? How am I going to be a good neighbor to the entire community? Not just of the people that they're pointing me against, but of the others as well, of their quote unquote victims. How can I live my life for Christ in that moment? How do I speak love? How do I act in love. Because if I'm acting in love, if I am always looking to respond with love, not just react, but to respond with love, if I am always looking to respond with love, ultimately, though the tyrant speaks lies into the air around me, speaks lies into me, I will never act the way the tyrant wants me to act. Ever. I will always act the way Christ wants me to act. And that is counter to the tyrant's desire, and it's counter to, it will act counter to the tyrant's maintaining of power or achieving it in the first place. Again, we're going to be lied to, and we're going to accept them. But I don't have to accept the hatred. I don't have to accept the anger. I don't have to accept the violence, the distrust. I don't have to accept the emotional, physical reaction that they're trying to elicit from me as my own. I can respond in love. Screw the tyrant. Amen.